Hi there. So today I am really delighted to be joined by my amazing personal trainer, Natalie Liu Roach. Natalie is, I think, the best trainer I've ever had. She's just so incredibly knowledgeable and amazing at both making sure that I do things in the gym with the best form possible, but also pushing me quite hard, sometimes a bit too hard for my liking, to use weights that are much heavier than I've used before. And that's really helped me to increase my overall strength, which is a great feeling, particularly as I come up to my imminent 60th birthday. So although this podcast is aimed at women working in and around the law, we're not discussing careers or the law today, but something that I think is just as important, which is how do we make sure we're as fit and healthy and happy as possible, recognizing the demands of our jobs. And I think nowadays there seems to be sort of a general agreement on the basics of what we need for our mental and physical health, and also to improve our longevity and just generally make sure that we can enjoy our days as much as possible. And I guess there are around, I think it's 6 things. So sleep is a big thing that used to be something that people sort of prided themselves on not having any of, that the smallest hours of sleep that you could possibly have, it was considered really cool. Now that all the tech bros who've all just been at the inauguration are all sort of competing about how long they're sleeping and how much deep sleep they get or how much REM sleep they get because of all the trackers we have. So sleep, then diet and exercise, and we'll be focusing on those 2 things today. Time in nature is now regarded as incredibly important and useful in terms of things like reducing anxiety, making sure we don't get depressed, just generally for our well-being overall. And then social connection and mindfulness type activities that bring us into the present, so we're not always going ahead into the future or back into the past. But as I said, today we're going to focus on exercise and a little bit of nutrition, and that's why I've asked Natalie to come along, and it's amazing to have her here. So Natalie, tell us a bit about, like, how did you get into fitness, and then what are you doing nowadays in terms of your fitness? What sort of training does an elite personal trainer do herself?
Yeah, so in terms of my background in fitness, I started very young. I was always doing sports from a young age, particularly more dance and performing arts based. When I left school, I decided to do my level 2 and 3 personal trainer qualifications. So that was my first entry to the industry. And I was basically just inspired by one of my colleagues because I was working as a lifeguard in a gym. And I started doing the fitness classes there, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And she started training with me. And since then, I kind of fell in love with fitness, and it's been a huge part of my life since. I decided to change my degree at uni from a geography-based to sports science.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it literally changed the trajectory of my life course, really. And I haven't looked back since. I've jumped between a few gyms, but I've been quite solidly based at First Base and just doing little bits and bobs online with some clients that I've picked up from various other gyms that I've been working at.
And in the past, you used to do like proper like competitions and things, didn't you? For like, I don't know what you call it. What do you call it? Bodybuilding?
Bodybuilding, yes.
Yeah.
I did compete in bodybuilding for 3 years during uni. I was doing it alongside my degree and doing a part-time job. So that was probably the best time to do it because you don't have as much responsibility at uni. You just have to study. So I spent pretty much all my time studying, training and cooking. But yeah, I stopped competing in 2020. And that was when I kind of went back into personal training. And yeah, I've kind of dipped in and out of it, but it's been a solid sort of trajectory and something that I've worked for the last 10 years. And so it's been really cool to see how much has changed since then as well.
Yeah. When you were doing, because I know like in the olden days, bodybuilding, like we used to think of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but then this whole like bikini bodybuilding with women doing it where they actually look, I mean, you do look very muscly, but you look pretty amazing. But did you have to do all the fake tan and the oil and like all
I had to. Yeah, you've got to sleep in tan and you've got to put more tan on the next day and then oil up before you go on stage. It was definitely a very interesting experience. It's a very weird one because you do it once, you're like, I'm never going to do it again. And then you go through the whole day and you're like, I wanted another one. But I did step away from bodybuilding and I transitioned towards doing more Olympic lifting now. So I do basically the category in the Olympics is Olympic weightlifting. So it's the snatch and the clean and jerk are the two main lifts. So I transitioned from more aesthetic goals to more strength and power-based training, which is challenging. It's also fun, but it gave me something different to focus on that was not purely aesthetic based.
Yeah.
And it was very humbling to go in and be like, okay, well, it's not something that's very easily achievable. Neither is bodybuilding by any means, but it just definitely took away the pressure of having to look a certain way. And I could channel that energy towards something else that brought me back into full health.
And it actually is interesting as a concept because, I mean, I don't know if it's just my age or if there is a shift in society. It might be quite subtle, but away from aesthetic and towards strength. I don't know if you think like most people used to go to the gym to lose weight. I don't know how you found it. Do you think there is a shift where people are getting more interested in strength than in the way they look? Although I suppose with, like Instagram and TikTok, there must be a lot of focus on aesthetics still. Yeah. What do you find with your clients and what do you think is most important to them?
It's definitely a combination of the two. People typically do still come to the gym because they want to either build or work on an aspect of themselves, whether it's trying to get healthier. Sometimes clients come in because they've had some health checks with health insurance providers and they've said things like your cholesterol's really high or you've got to bring your body fat down and your muscle mass is quite low. So sometimes they get very objective reasons to come into the gym and actually train. But a lot of the time people do want to look better, but they also want to move better as well. And when I worked in transformation studios, typically people would come in because they want to change how they look in 12 weeks. So it's like a very aggressive diet and training protocol. But within that period, I would try to encourage my clients to focus on how much stronger they're getting, because I think purely focusing on how you look, if things don't change the way you want to in 12 weeks, it can be really disheartening. And, so looking at things like if the strength increases over time, composition does also improve, but it just does take a little bit longer. Like for people to get really good results, it typically takes a year to get all of the benefits for health as well. So it's just like increasing bone density, really seeing that shift in your performance and the changes in body composition. It just does take a little bit longer. So if you can encourage people to focus on things like, wow, they were kind of squatting or lifting one weight and then 12 weeks later, it's gone up by 20 to 50%. It's really good feeling. And it's like, oh, like it gives them that empowerment of feeling like I can achieve something.
Yeah.
And even if the weight doesn't shift in the way they want it to, they've lost some, but not reached their goal. They've still got something else that they can be like, I've achieved this. And it kind of like, for me personally, and a lot of my clients, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I've done that. And then the complexity of the exercise increases and they'll leave a session feeling really good. And that's where I aim to get most people when they go out the gym, is not leaving thinking, oh, I haven't lost that extra kilo I wanted to, but hey, I've added some more weight to my lifts. I'm getting stronger. I'm feeling better. They can apply that to anything they want to. Like that confidence you go out with is really infectious.
Yeah. And I guess ideally, you want this, if the trouble with going and doing a transformation in 12 weeks is then what happens after those 12 weeks. And ideally you want this to be something that becomes a habit, just part of your life, so that you can just stay fit and healthy for the rest of your life and keep your strength instead of losing your strength as you get older, I guess. So on that, like if I said to you, what's the ideal, and I know it varies from person to person and depending on age, but for women generally, what would you recommend what types of exercise? So we've got all sorts of different types of cardio, we've got weights. Like, what would you ideally recommend people are doing if they were going to say, each week, what should I try to fit into my diary?
So I would typically say for the majority of people, like particularly women, if you can do 2 to 3 resistance training sessions a week, which is any form of exercise which utilizes an external load. So that doesn't necessarily have to be going to a gym. It can be using your own body weight. So doing things like press ups, body weight lunges, squats, full body, or each muscle group twice a week.
Okay. So we don't have to have weights for resistance training, because I guess I always think, I feel like I've got to have a machine I'm pressing against or some weights, but doing your own body weight, that will count as resistance training, will it?
Yes, definitely. The ways that you can increase the load as well over time is, yes, you may get to a point where that becomes easy. So how you progressively overload that over time, you may outrun that essentially. So it might be that you start with body weight, but then you're like, okay, this is relatively easy now. So do you increase the number of repetitions you do, or do you add like a dumbbell to it or whatever? So I think it really depends on where you're starting. But if you're very new to it and you want to just get your base level of training, I would say you can start body weight or use bands if you want to, and then just gradually increase that over time. So people have this misconception that you need to do really, really heavy weights. It's not really the case. It's wherever you start from, whatever is manageable but challenging. So in terms of the challenge, it's, can you perform the exercise while maintaining good form so that the technique is good? If you see that breaking down, or you start to get pain in certain areas, or it feels like you're fatiguing, then you've probably gone a little bit too far. So it's knowing where you can work towards, essentially.
If I assume for resistance training, let's assume I'm either going to a gym or I've got some weights at home. So what would you recommend? So I know like squats is always something like everyone says, like do them when you're brushing your teeth, or even, if you're not using weights. But if I've got some weights, what would you, if you were going to give me a group of exercises to do as resistance training, what type of things would they be?
Typically, if you had a pair of dumbbells at home, I would prescribe typically some squat related patterns. So either with a dumbbell at your chest or to the sides, some press ups. So you're getting a body pushing movement. So
I guess on your knees to begin with, but with a straight body.
Or against the chair. So you've got like that elevation. So it's reducing the angle that you're at. Obviously, if you're more vertical, it's a bit easier. So even against the wall, if that even feels too challenging, because then you're still teaching yourself how to maintain that full body tension without having to knees. But again, you can go on to knees as well. A form of rowing, so either a single arm row, which incorporates a little bit more rotation, or 2 dumbbells rowing. Typically, I like to do a single leg exercise as well, which I know are not very popular amongst some people.
Particularly me.
Like a lunge or a split squat, and then some form of posterior chain, which is, for example, like the back of your body, which should be like a deadlift variation.
Deadlift. Okay. So if we're doing like rowing, trying to get our triceps, are we?
Yeah, rowing is typically biceps and back.
Biceps. Okay.
The push-ups will be more chest, shoulders, triceps, because the triceps work when you extend the arm or when you straighten your arms. That's when they start to contract. So anytime where you're doing a pushing movement, anytime you're doing a pulling movement, that's when your biceps and your back, the muscles on your back are working the most. So doing some sort of like a push and a pull exercise for the upper and the lower body at least twice a week is great. And then you can incorporate any abdominal corrective work if you want to. So like planks on your elbows, or like a dead bug.
Why do you call it corrective work? Is it not just abdominal strengthening?
It's sometimes what a corrective exercise is changing a certain element of someone's posture, or like if something is oriented in a way, a corrective aims to readjust or realign something.
Okay.
So for example, if you're very extended and you typically have like maybe your chest is quite far forward and your lower back is quite tight, we might
like
do
sway back. Sway back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so like quite excessive like curve in your lower back, for example. And you might do an exercise to help reverse that movement, do the opposite, so that when you go into your squat, that's not restricting your range of motion when you go down. So it's allowing your posterior chain or your back and your pelvis to go into an eccentric orientation. So it allows you those muscles to kind of relax a little bit more. So you can get more length through the front of your body, like your quadriceps, for example.
Okay. So including like what we'd call abdominal exercises like plank or shoulder taps and I know that you're looking at, I mean, I guess there is stuff out there on the internet about basic, if people look up resistance training, but you're also creating a program, aren't you, that people, is that right? You're putting together something that people can access online.
Yes, definitely. I've basically set up a team training, which is basically a group of women and they do the same program. So I've created like a 12-week program and every week they get access to it. Some of them send videos in and I'll give some feedback and essentially like it's a group coaching. So the program is the same. It is gym based, but we're looking at creating a home based one as well. So it's a little bit more accessible for people who can't access the gyms. And essentially what that is just, it's nice to have a little community together. And I wanted to create something that's affordable and also builds a community that encourages people to actually train.
Forming habits and everything. One of the things they always say is like having a community. Okay, so we've got our resistance training twice a week. And then do we still need to build in some form of cardio as well?
Yes. So the cardiovascular element, typically government guidelines say 2.5 to 3 hours a week. And that's not just sort of standing on a treadmill for 3 hours and jogging. It's more sort of like you can incorporate brisk walking if you're cycling into work. I typically also give step targets to clients. So hitting like 8 to 10K steps a day, which is approximately 90 minutes of walking. But because of the fact that most people have quite sedentary jobs nowadays, if someone has a weight loss goal or they actually just don't end up moving enough and they start to get like stiffness in certain joints, they start to feel like they're getting a bit weaker, having that step goal just kind of takes the pressure off like thinking I've got to go out and do an hour of cardio now or like go to the gym, run on the treadmill. Of course you can do that if you want to, but trying to build that into a daily routine, that might be that you walk a little bit further to the tube in the morning, like you go to the next stop, or you walk to the next bus stop, or you go on your lunch break, you add in a 15-20 minute walk, or you take the stairs up to the next floor to use the bathroom or whatever. It's just encouraging people to move a little bit more.
Okay, so not necessarily like running for ages, but I guess things like aerobics or HIIT classes, Barry's boot camp, would you recommend those as well?
I would say in smaller doses, yes. I think if that's your sole form of training, like you were talking about earlier with the sort of the sleep side of things, it depends if you're giving yourself enough time to recover. So these sort of training workouts, they produce a lot of cortisol. Because they're very high intensity. Your heart rate is really high during them. So you might leave feeling this massive adrenaline rush and really hyped. And then an hour later, you might crash in terms of energy. So if you have a very stressful job and then you're doing training, which is very intense, if you're not able to recover that through your sleep and nutrition, it kind of accumulates. And that's when we start to see things like injuries or people getting very fatigued, relying on too much caffeine, which again then starts to interrupt that sleep cycle. So it's all about whether you can recover from the demands of life and the training itself. I think they're two big components. So sparingly, yeah. I mean, personally, I don't do things like Barry's, but I know a lot of people do enjoy it. And I think if it gets you moving and you enjoy it, absolutely fair enough. But would I do it 5 times a week? Probably not. Maybe like once or twice a week, and then substituting with some other forms of exercise that are going to encourage better recovery, more restorative things like yin yoga, things that are going to just bring your sympathetic nervous system down so that you can rest properly and recover.
Okay, so we've got our resistance training and cardio, but perhaps not an old-fashioned view of cardio, but sort of a more updated version. Is there anything else you think we should try and build into an exercise program?
I also include in the majority of my clients' programs power training. So power training it sort of has a relationship with strength where it's about producing a maximal amount of force or a high amount, but we add an element of speed to it as well. And what that does is it helps to improve the strength of your muscles and tendons. So as we age, our risk of getting injured from falls and things does increase.
Yeah, so I'm wondering now, I'm going to be 60. I think there's this age where you go from, oh, Erica's fallen over to Erica's had a fall. We're like, we keep joking about, am I at the age where I've had a fall? I hope not. I hope not quite yet. But yeah, so we do have to think about it. Like, I know, we're encouraged to stand on one leg again when we're brushing our teeth. But so this power training, so give us an example of what that looks like and why it helps.
So an example I would use is typically with the majority of my clients, I use medicine balls. So those balls in the gym that are a little bit weighted, they have some weight in them. So you can't really necessarily throw it really far and it's going to fly across the room like a tennis ball. It's quite weighted. So we might do things like an overhead slam, or we throw it against a wall, and you do like a moderate amount of repetitions between like 6 to 8 or 10. 2 to 3 sets. And essentially what we're doing there is incorporating some rotation in. It's kind of teaching you to kind of produce high amounts of force, but with speed. You're doing it as fast as possible. Another thing we do is things like drops, where we might go from like a small box and drop down.
Jump down from a box.
Yes. So you kind of jump down, or think, I like to describe it as kind of like if you think about pirate ships when people walk the plank and they drop off. Into the sea. It's kind of like that, but you're kind of hitting the water in a position where like you can kind of stop yourself collapsing into the ground. So you're trying to resist that.
Yeah.
So you're pushing yourself before your body kind of flops. Like we don't want to kind of land all floppy. We want to be nice and stiff and kind of absorb the force well. Or we might do the opposite and jump up to a box, where the box is going to absorb some of that force for you. So depending on where the client is at, initially I might do a low box jump, so they're jumping up to something, and then we'll start doing more force absorption, which is dropping down because it's higher impact on the joints. So I would typically incorporate those as power exercises, and then over time you can increase the complexity by doing things like hops or skips, where you might see a lot of these videos of people like bounding across the gym or in kind of athletic settings, is that's what you can kind of progress towards.
Right. Yeah. And I know my physios told me to hop, but very controlled hops backwards and forwards for skiing. And actually it's so interesting because in actually both Ashtanga or sort of Vinyasa yoga and Iyengar, you jump into it. And in Iyengar, I'm like, oh, really? Why do I have to jump? It sort of it irritates me. But he was so clever because he did it. And I've said to people, why do we have to jump into all the positions? And it's like, they say it because he did it to make your joints stronger. So, and you jump back in Ashtanga yoga. So it's so interesting that these things, they were doing them for a reason. They weren't just doing them for the sake, it looked good. They were actually doing them for the same sort of reason you were talking about with the power, like having some sort of jumping impact. Okay, so we should do
backed by science now as well. So everything that they were doing back then, we're like, oh, there's a reason for it now.
It's very cool. So so a bit of as well as resistance cardio, some power. Anything else you think that would be good, or is that really enough?
I think that's sufficient, because what I don't want to tell people to do too many things at once, because I think if I'm going for something that's sustainable, majority of my clients do that, and they're typically really healthy and they progress really nicely doing that 2 to 3 times a week. They'll add some walking or cardiovascular, and in our sessions we'll always do some strength and power work. And then if they come into the gym outside of that, I typically see them redoing the session or something very similar, and it works really well. If you kind of say to people that you've got to do loads and loads of sessions, like it probably doesn't work, because our lives get in the way, depending on what works, is like you've got to find balance. And doing too much is also a thing as well. Like you don't want to overload yourself and go through kind of like how we do with some people do with dieting, and you go from an extreme diet to completely off the rails. You don't want to do the same with training and kind of go off full steam ahead and then 5 weeks later, like, oh, I'm so tired, I'm just going to skip today. And then it becomes
you really hate it. And so you don't.
it has to be enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we do, which, and I know Stacey Sims, who I will put a link to a couple of podcasts with Stacey Sims, although the latest one on Diary of a CEO, she does talk in a very doctorly way, but she's just so interesting because she's one of the first scientists, I guess, who's really been studying. There are a group of them who've been studying women specifically and training, and before everything has been based on men. But one of the things I really liked that I know we do is we do these very short bursts of cardio, intense cardio at the end of a session, where we'll do literally 3 sessions of 20 seconds going full out on a bike as fast as you possibly can, and then a 90-second recovery. And in Stacey Sims' sort of vocabulary, that's HIIT. She calls that HIIT. Yes. She doesn't call Barry's boot camp. She's like, oh, that's level 2. And she's like, try and do these really intense things. You don't have to do, but what I love about it is it's so short and so sharp. So if I go to the gym on my own, I'm like, look, I can do 1 minute of this hideous, like going really, really fast. And I, in my head, I'm like, oh, that's really making a difference, even though it's really quick. So would you say, is that just as you get older, or would you recommend that for everyone?
You can do that from any stage. What another term for that is energy systems development training. Okay. So what that is essentially is allowing you to utilize energy from a variety of sources. Energy system development aims to increase your mitochondrial capacity so you can produce more energy. You have a nice recovery period afterwards, so you can perform at higher intensities within that short frame of time, and it's repeatable efforts. So over time, you will start to see that maybe in that 15 seconds, you can push your output higher, or you can do another round. So it might go from 3 to 4, or the duration might increase. So over time, you start to see that your capacity improves, and that will essentially help with your ability to deliver oxygen to the cells faster. It allows you to recover faster. Your power output increases. It transfers to your strength because you can produce more force. So it essentially helps to build everything. So that's what we call it energy systems development, because our body utilizes energy from different sources. And doing these high intensity bouts of exercise where you still have a nice recovery period, like you said, it feels nicer because I'm not just getting you to sit on the bike and do a max effort 10-minute cycle that just feels horrible.
Yeah.
You can get like it's short, sharp bursts that's repeatable. You're not going off hot and then you're just fatiguing on the next 2 rounds. It's nice, good intensity for 3 rounds and then it's done.
Yeah.
And then you can repeat it.
Yeah. I do see everyone. I feel in my head, I feel like it's doing me some good. And actually the other things that she said, maybe we'll talk about fasting in a minute when we talk about food, because she also has a view on that. But one of the things she said is that saunas, like heat is really good for women, but extreme cold is not so good. So she's like, we have a cold plunge in the gym, and obviously a lot of people are doing cold plunge, but that level of cold, she's like, you just don't need that as a woman. And actually it's probably putting you under too much stress compared to a male body. So I was delighted to hear that I could spend more time in the sauna and then have just a cold shower afterwards instead of having to do the horrible.
Yeah, that's what I do. I used to do quite extreme ice baths, and I ended up getting really bad blood flow circulation after that. I get cold hands and feet very quickly. I haven't been diagnosed with Raynaud's, but I just have a feeling like I've got low blood pressure, and like going in the cold is horrible, and I force myself to do it. But I would chuck in 5 kilos of ice into the bath at home and sit in cold water for 5 minutes. I can't bring myself to do it again. And I was so relieved to hear her say that.
I know, it was brilliant, wasn't it? It was so good. Someone else will come out and say the opposite. But anyway, for the moment, take what Stacey's telling us. And then do we need to do anything like warming up or cooling down? And then I guess we should talk about flexibility. But yeah, do you need to do warm-ups and cool downs?
Typically, I have the warm-up there to essentially, what that's doing is helping increase blood flow. You're getting increasing your range of motion in certain joints. I typically like to foam roll a little bit as well, because it kind of adds some pressure to the muscles that can help them relax a little bit more, which increases how much range of motion you might have in a joint, so how much movement you have there. Cool downs, I don't typically cool down myself. Some of my clients do like to stretch post. If you're going to, you can do it. Like if it feels good, then I would say do it. But
Yeah.
I like to do my cool down as like a sauna. Like I use that as like my recovery. I find it's really nice to do. So if you can jump in a sauna or have a nice hot shower afterwards, like I think that's just as good. Because essentially when you finish exercise, going into the heat, because exercise causes your muscles to swell and grow, and sort of you have that time period where they need the recovery, the muscles heating up more in the sauna can help boost that as well.
Right.
The cold
can help cardiovascularly as well, can't it? Because it
exactly
continues to raise heartbeat in the sauna.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think increasingly people are starting to realize how great saunas are if you can hit them, at least once a week, if not twice.
Yeah, it was definitely not a thing when I was starting PT, and over the last 5 years, everyone is constantly in the sauna now.
Yeah, cool,
which is amazing.
Yeah, it is. It feels very good. So let's talk a bit about like eating and exercise and what we should. I mean, in terms of like, obviously there are these pre-workout drinks, and there's stuff around. Should you train fasted or not fasted? What's your view on let's say you're doing resistance training, not just walking fast, but if you're doing something a bit more major, so proper resistance training, do you recommend doing?
So typically I would say having some protein before is definitely a good place to start. If you're looking to perform in the gym, carbohydrates essentially improve your performance because you're not using the glycogen in your muscles as a fuel, but you're getting carbohydrates from an external source. So essentially you've got more energy in your system that you can use. So something quite easy and simple, like if you're in a rush, having something like a banana and a protein shake might be a nice way to go. If you've got a little bit more time before, having like a nice bowl of oats with some protein in, or like eggs and toast if you've got like an hour and a half before you train, something that's quite easy and simple. I'd say if you can fuel before your session, it's a good thing to do. First thing in the morning and you can't quite stomach foods, just having a protein shake and then taking some carbohydrates with you and having them as and when you need can be also a really good thing to do. But typically I say if you're going in for quite a heavy session or you're looking to lift a decent amount of weight, like you're going in there because you want to push, having fuel in the tank is a good way to go. Like a car with a full tank is going to go a lot faster than a tank that's half empty.
Yeah. Okay. And what about caffeine? Because a lot of people are into having caffeine before they train.
Yes. Caffeine is in fact a performance enhancement or enhancer. A lot of people do take caffeine because it can reduce your ability to sense pain. So it increases your pain threshold and it boosts cognitive function. So you might be a little bit more focused on your workout. For me, I can push a little bit more with the caffeine because of that. But I think the thing you've got to consider is the time of day. If you're training like late afternoon, evening, if you're quite sensitive to caffeine, it's probably not a good idea to have it after 2 p.m. And it might be that you just have to rely a little bit more on some carbohydrates instead.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Caffeine is amazing if you can tolerate it and you enjoy it. If you don't have caffeine, you don't need it.
Yeah.
But if you're a little bit lower on energy, looking at ways to improve your performance would just be for sort of increasing the carbohydrate intake around training, pre and post, so that you're replenishing your glycogen afterwards as well, and protein to just help the muscles recover faster. But essentially, if you're having caffeine, have it in the earlier parts of the day so it doesn't disrupt your sleep later on.
Yeah. Okay. And then after workout, should we be having a protein shake or something?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
I think that there's been a lot of evidence that suggested that the anabolic window, which essentially means post-workout, there's a window of time where your muscles are more sensitive to protein intake. So they will essentially recover faster and you'll get a higher amount of muscle growth or muscle protein synthesis
Mm-hmm.
if you have protein within the first 30 minutes after you work out. They've kind of disproven this now. So it's not essential to have it within the 30 minutes, but as soon as you can have a meal afterwards, it's a good thing to have protein in that meal.
Mm-hmm.
So they've sort of said 20 to 30 grams per meal is a good place to start. As we age, our ability to metabolize and utilize protein does decrease. So they sort of say having a little bit more will help the absorption. So aiming for 30 grams
Mm-hmm.
would be a good place to go. So again, like depending on how busy your lifestyle is, if you can sit down and have a meal with like a palm-sized piece of protein, like a chicken breast or a couple of eggs, some yogurt, whatever that is. If you're a vegan or plant-based, like a combination of beans and pulses, so you're getting a good amount in there, is a great thing to do. The reason why I say protein shakes for a lot of people is because it's convenient.
Yeah.
And it's easy if you can tolerate it. If you don't mind the taste and you can stomach the shakes, it's a good way of getting high quality protein in because they have a high leucine content in them. And leucine is essentially an amino acid which stimulates muscle growth.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got something with a high amount of leucine in it, it's going to mean that your muscles can recover and grow faster, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So build muscle, improve our body composition, improve strength. Having something with a high amount of leucine will help support that muscle growth.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, again, Stacey Sims is she's not extreme, but she's like quite adamant. Like she's like, you should have, I mean, I think she does when she's exercising, you know, she's an elite, or was an elite athlete. So when she exercises, it sounds like she does weights and then swims in the sea for an hour. So she's not doing what I'm doing.
She's very high intense.
Yeah. But she was like, you should have 15 grams of protein before you go. And she still says for women, not for men, within 30 to 45 minutes after you need to be having 30 grams of protein. So it's interesting. And then she's definitely...
Ideally, yes, you do. But like I think it's not a substantial difference if you're not training for a competition.
Yeah, at her level. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's so independent.
Yeah. I mean, and she was interesting because I got very into intermittent fasting because I don't like eating in the morning, but she's adamant, like, you've got to have something she's like, otherwise you're going into the gym, burning lean mass, and what you're trying to do is put lean mass on. So she's like, you've got to tell your system it's all right. It doesn't need to burn that muscle that you're trying to build up. Otherwise you're going into the gym and achieving nothing, which does make sense. Yeah.
But you don't typically train in the morning, right? You typically train after you've had like a light meal.
That's for me. Yeah.
So there have been studies that have investigated this with intermittent or time restricted feeding on performance. And the interesting thing with the studies is they found no significant effects, but the people who were doing the time restricted feeding were training once they'd broken the fast. So they were never going fasted.
Yeah.
So I think from a muscle growth perspective, yes, it would potentially enhance performance. But again, if it doesn't quite work with your lifestyle, I think the resistance training itself will negate some of the effects of like muscle loss because of the stimulus you're getting from it.
Yeah.
If you're going in and doing like a strength resistance based training session.
And then what about supplements like creatine? Would you recommend taking those?
I think everyone should be taking creatine, yes. Creatine is the most researched supplement out there. It's essentially a compound which it allows you to donate a creatine to phosphocreatine. So that is converted into ATP, which our body utilizes as energy. So if we have more creatine, we can synthesize more ATP. So your ability to create more energy essentially increases. And ATP is used in all of our active tissues, even our brains as well. So when our brains are performing like very complex tasks, or you're functioning at like a very high level, we use ATP. So it's a really good thing to have just in general, just as a protective mechanism.
But not to do with exercise alone. It's to do with your brain, how your brain works. Okay.
Yeah, it has a role in it. So it's not solely, because your brain also uses glycogen as well, but it will, in some highly advanced tasks, your brain does utilize ATP and creatine. So they've found it can boost cognitive function. But in terms of improving your strength, your overall health, like, it's a great thing to have. And you don't necessarily have to have extremely high doses. Anywhere from 3 to 5 grams a day is a good ballpark figure to go for. That's the recommended dose that you'd get on the container. So it's like just 1 scoop. Some people,
even if you're not working out that day, so you have it every day, even if you only work out like twice a week, you'd still take it every day.
Yeah, I would still say, because it will just help you recover faster. It will help maintain your strength, so that when you then go back into the gym, you'll be getting stronger faster, essentially. It's a really good way to support recovery and overall muscle health.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. And anything else, do you think? Any other supplements, or is that really what you recommend?
I also like omega-3s. They're great anti-inflammatory, great for joint health. Again, cognitive function as well. A lot of my clients take omega-3s. Vitamin D, I'd say, just being in the Northern Hemisphere, it's great to help support immune function, particularly if you're doing resistance training or you're doing something like berries. Having something that's going to help support your immune system throughout the year is a great thing. I will always say vitamin D is up there, and the majority of people get deficient. So a lot of my clients who start getting sick in winter, I ask them, I'm like, oh, are you taking vitamin D? And a lot of them aren't. Obviously, it's great to get a blood test first to check your levels, because you might be fine and it could be something else. But a lot of the time, if it's like a chronic thing that's happening in the winter months, and obviously we do get a lot more viruses and colds throughout the winter, or we notice it more, I'd say vitamin D is also up there as well. So vitamin D, creatine, omega-3, and then a protein supplement if you can, or if it just helps you, like whey-based or plant-based isolates as well. They just have a really good amino acids profile, high in lutein.
It's an isolate of protein shake. Is that what it is? What's an isolate?
We call isolate. It just means like it's like isolated protein. I don't know.
Oh, it says protein, but it's a protein shake. It's basically lovely. And then lastly, like, what's your advice to clients in terms of maintaining motivation when they first start out on their exercise journey? What would you advise them to help them keep it up?
In terms of getting someone motivated to train, initially it's always high, because people go in with this attitude that they're like, I'm ready to go. I'm looking forward to this. And just understanding that everything takes time. Like, it will take time to get stronger, to not beat yourself up if there are days that you don't feel great. Like, the most important thing is that you just keep going and you're consistent. Just like brushing your teeth, or, just waking up and getting on with your day-to-day routine, training becomes part of it. So just not looking at one individual session if you're not feeling great. It's okay to just scale it back as long as you keep showing up. Because relying solely on motivation alone will not get you to where you want to be. So the majority of my clients, I sort of say, there's going to be days where motivation fluctuates, but remember what your why is, why you started. Understand that if your goals are to improve your health and to age gracefully, and to maintain that strength and to be able to go through life in the healthiest way possible, you're going to need to be consistent. So consistency is the goal. And as long as you show up every week, it's going to count.
Yeah.
And that is my biggest motivation. I tell my mom all the time, like, it's so important to just keep going. Like, it doesn't matter if you do less weight on 1 week and then it fluctuates over time. We're looking at the overall trend, and you will see that improve.
Yeah.
So don't let one bad day set you off. Don't beat yourself up. Don't be harsh on yourself. Showing up is the most important thing.
Yeah, brilliant. And I do sometimes, I probably find doing like the resistance training the hardest thing. And, quite rightly, because we're trying to make it harder each time. So what I do is because you always feel better at the end, no matter what. You very rarely feel terrible at the end and wish you hadn't done it. You're always like pretty pleased you've done it. So I try and come out of the gym and just stand for a second or two outside the gym and just try and almost take a snapshot of how I'm feeling, so that when I'm at home and I don't want to come to the gym and it's dark and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that, I'm like, no, remember what you felt like when you took that snapshot. And that really helps me go and think, no, I'm going to be glad that I did this. And sometimes that helps me get over the hump of wanting to try and find something that means I can avoid it. Yeah.
100%. I have those days all the time. Like if I've started really early in the morning and I'm towards the end of my cycle and I'm like, I don't want to do it, but I have to, like, I'm not going to push today. I just have to show up, get it done, and I never regret it. And I don't know anyone who's ever turned around and was like, I really regret that. Unless you're sick. But majority of the time, even if you're having a tough week, actually just showing up can be a nice break from whatever you're doing, and just being kind to yourself, allowing yourself to enjoy the journey and the process is very important.
Absolutely. Okay, well, look, thank you so much, Natalie. That's been amazing. And as we talked about earlier, Natalie has this program. So we'll put details of that in the notes to the podcast. I'll also put a link to Stacey Sims on Huberman so you can have a listen to her, because it is really interesting, like listening to someone who is an expert in women and sport and fitness. But yes, check out Natalie's program. Having the group cohort element is always fantastic in terms of motivation, and go out there and be fit and healthy for the rest of the year, not just January, like all those people who are currently making the gym very busy. So thank you so much, Natalie.
No, thank you so much for having me. Take care.